Welcome to a special yours truly Tea with Dragon special freestyle geopolitics and rock and roll edition in this room office and temple that is still the Sabbath until sunset, of course, and it's Sunday, June 1st. So Sabbath is continuing until sunset. Today starts at midnight. Friday, basically 1 second in the Saturday. So encouraging all to work out, train, exercise today. Gonna take a bath and stretch, and yours truly just gonna freestyle a little bit. Got some of that Canadian, made in Canada, Canada special ice wine herbal tea. So we're gonna rock and roll with this flavored natural Canadian ice wine, and we're gonna go overtime every time, I guess, but maybe not so overtime today. We're just gonna freestyling a little bit. So I'm gonna commence with gratitude, grateful, thankful. Today's June 1st. I guess I'm gonna have to pay my rent by 7 p.m. deadline. 7 p.m. deadline, Canadian EST standard, Hawk Island time. Maybe this video is gonna air after that, 9 p.m. or tomorrow morning. I don't know exactly for sure. So encouraging all to work out, train, exercise. But paid my electricity bill. That was Friday. Paid my electricity bill, and of course got some food, got some coffee, and got some tea. Canadian True Premium. Nobody gives me any sponsorship whatsoever at the present moment in time, so I'm just showing it because it's of course made in Canada, local products, and we need to get rid of those tariffs ASAP, as of course the imposition of tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel oncoming now. The augmentation of 25% is going to be problematic, and you know how we rock and roll. It's a Dragon versus Trump edition since 2018. Of course, have been and will continue to challenge Donald Trump to a boxing match on the Canadian-US border, and calling for the building of the North American People's Imperial Coliseum on the Canadian-US border ever since the imposition of those tariffs. So let's make a deal. This Quebecer Canadian who was born in the United States 3 times, once as a woman, twice as a man, served in the United States Armed Forces twice. Same U.S. Armed Forces, 156 years apart. As a matter of fact, let me get those gloves. Let me get the gloves, because I'm still challenging Donald Trump to a boxing match on the Canadian-US border. Flex a bit on the fitness journey ever since 2017, after I crossed Canada coast to coast. And of course, that moment, that event in my life made me come out of being depressed and suicidal. I was depressed and suicidal prior to that event, and I always got a market and celebrating as well. More than 5 years and survived COVID right in this small underground room office and temple. 2020, survived COVID in 2020. February, March, I thought I was gonna die. It was like death, pestilence, and disease. It was like death, pestilence, and disease. It was like death, pestilence, and disease. I know it sounds like a rock and roll, hardcore metal, trash metal, death, trash metals, raps, rock and roll song, but that's how I gonna go about it. And I died right here in this room office and temple. Nothing that I will to go back to. But of course, let me get those gloves before I proceed. Let me get the gloves. Right here. Yeah, there we go. We got the food, and I just found some more food in the backpack, so I'm gonna be grateful, thankful. I got this soup, I got these noodles, ramen noodles, chicken flavor. Let's see where they're at. I already disinfected them. Product of Vietnam, product of Vietnam, and these were the donations, and this is product of India, and the other one. So there's this one. This is distributed by Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA. So it's certified organic, and it says minimum 35% post-consumer content. So that means that it's made from 100% recycled paperboard. So that's good for the environment. But again, I stress all because I had a little bit of an upsetting moments in the past weeks, because I've been checking, the public garbage bins, and I've been seeing a lot of cans and plastic cans and paper and plastic containers that should go in the recycling. So we have to do our individual part, for the environment as much as we can. Blah blah blah. We have to do the individual, so make sure, just hold it. I know you can get a little bit uncomfortable to hold it a few more seconds, a few more meters, or whatever the case may be, until you get to the next recycling bin. But please do so, because every bin that I check, almost a lot of them have contents that should go in the recycling. So if the individual citizen, you put it in the garbage, that means that we don't do our part, correct? Because we have to do an individual part and the collective. And of course, it's always the balance of the individual and the collective, as yours truly does as best as I can. Sometimes, of course, I also gotta be checked, and also gotta do my part. It's just something that I say, please, 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 and try as best as you can. Here I am financially stressed, but I'm gonna say my gratitude again that I have the dream, of course, of the DGA Dancing Goddess Army, because dancing is my favorite sport, and I can dance as the priestess, HNNH of the goddess, as I get that rainbow dragon zero, Adrian Hannah dragon, rebirthing right here post-COVID, when I died during COVID, and presenting the gloves. Thank you to my anonymous friend. When if I make $1 million, I'm gonna give half, 50%. A B, I'm gonna give half, 50%. A tree, I'm gonna give half, 50% for gifting me these red gloves. I think more than 6 years ago now. 6 years ago, about 2018, when I started challenging Donald Trump after the imposition of those tariffs on the Canadian aluminum and steel, which was a mistake. So I'm auctioning them for $1 million. I'm auctioning this hat, which I bought secondhand for, I think it was $3. Bought it secondhand, or $2, or below three max, something like that. I gotta check the bill. And I'm auctioning this shirt and the pants, and I'm auctioning lots of course, the steel toe boots, military grade boots, by which I marched more during about 4 years during COVID, more than all the generals of the NATO alliance combined. Yours truly in them, because I march every week. I get a minimum of 20 hours of marching dance workout. That's my minimum plateau. And last week I did more than 26. The other week I did more than 26. And I gotta say my gratitude again, because I got an employment opportunity. I made $30 an hour. It was the best, the most I ever made ever an hour. Before that I made 22, 25. One time deal for an hour. I made $50, but that was as an artist. It was, of course, poetic rock and roll. I was writing poetry, typing poetry on an old board about 5 years ago, more than 5, even 6 years ago maybe. I made that $50 for 1 hour. So that was basically the most I ever made doing writing some poetry, and the typing it. And I'm a poet, rock and roll, mostly rock and roll, that poet, and the world's greatest living dancing millennial rainbow poet, and present my dream to the world, the dancing goddess and the dragon kingdom, which is fundamentally a call for a public-private partnership across what I call the collective North American civilizational complex, across North America as a whole. So auctioning these gloves, thank you to my anonymous friend who gives me these great gifts about 6 years ago, when Donald Trump is gonna be maybe more than 6 years ago, and it's gonna be 7 years ago since Donald Trump imposed the first round of tariffs in the first Trump administration when he first got elected. Of course, it was around March 2018, 10% on Canadian aluminum and steel. So that was a mistake. So now we're gonna get into geopolitics, because I am an independent geopolitical theoretical analyst and theorist who also has this neurological mental divergent condition called Asperger's. So Asperger's, being an Aspie, we have these mutations of the brain, so, and again, Asperger's is not a mental illness. It is a neurological mental divergent condition. It just makes us predisposed to certain special interests, and also known as obsessive interests, that preoccupy our whole daily routines and rituals. And of course, those rituals and routines preoccupy our daily activities and daily life and how we interact with life. And Aspies, our brains have a mutation. Our brains are mutated, so this mutation of these brains, there's not a big percentile of these mutations, but they occur, of course, at the micro level. So enough to cause these changes in the patterns of how we interact with the world. And basically we're different, and we see the world differently than the vast majority of the 99.56%. And we Aspies, we constitute less than 1%, less than half of a percentage, about 0.44% of the world population of the North America have this neurological mental divergent condition known as Asperger's, also known as HFA. So certain things can be more difficult for us. It's not a mental illness. It's not a mental illness in that sense. Is just that certainly we have our difficulties when we socially interact, and the social manners of interaction, social interactions, and certain other things such as, personal space. We tend to breach it and come too close to comfort, like 5-6 inches, very close to the body. So that personal space, we tend to breach personal space. We tend to have characteristics such as repeating things 2-3 times, or echolalia, repeating the exact same sentence that somebody might utter and say. We might say it exactly verbatim per verbatim, or we might of course utilize very sophisticated intellectual, more academic language and terminologies and verbosities, which can be impeding or cannot are not necessarily applicable or necessary in the conversation. And of course, we have these special interests, and my trinity of special interest, also known as obsessive interest, but I don't utilize the terminology obsessive because obsessive is more negative. But in those special interests, we are super intense, super concentrated, and super focused. Super focused, super intense, super concentrated when we're involved in studying and learning those things that we are super involved with. Special interest for Aspies, and the Aspies have to be supported as much as one can in those special interests. And my holy trinity is geopolitics, 24/7 geopolitics, sports and fitness, dancing. Dancing is my favorite sport, but I love everything to do with sports and basketballs. And I gotta be saying today a little bit, I'm a bit upset because in the top 50 most paid athletes that made the most salary between 2024, January 2024 and January 2025, on those 12 months, beginning of 2024 till the end of 2024, out of the top 50 according to Forbes, there was not even one woman. There's not even one woman out of the top 50. It was not even one woman. And you get 50-50 with me, due to my reincarnations and past lives. Sometimes I was born a woman, a man, a woman, a man. Priestess from ancient Egypt to today, Priestess of ancient Egypt, and in ancient Sumer, ancient Babylon, ancient Rome, right here as a Quebecois. But Quebecois was not as today Quebecois, but in the early 1700s, about 1000, about the year 1704, And sometimes was born a man, a farmer, construction workers, and trader and banker, and different reincarnations, past lives. That's why today you get that 50-50, this 1st of June 2025, survived COVID, survived being depressed, and plenty of scars on my body, I guess, internal and external. Survived being attacked by surprise a few years ago. I gotta go this month. I'm gonna try to go before the summer starts. So I got about 22 days before summer starts to try to get the retrieval of the archives of the Jewish General Hospital when I went after I was attacked by surprise and hit my head, and had the right arm was dislocated, and the doctors cracked it back. I was at the emergency, and I was put on some medications, and because I was bloodied up, and I was like kind of in a coma state, and I guess I had my own psyllium pyoid episode, and I had that retrograde amnesia symptoms. I have lost of memory of my life prior to me moving here. I used to live in a very moldy place, underground basement, like a prison, dark prison cell, like dark, slimy, moldy prison type of cell type of thing. I used to live in Montreal Island, on the island of Montreal, and I moved here, and my life prior to that, those events prior to what I lived, it's kind of like blackout. So whatever caused it, whether prolonged illness or trauma to the head or whatever the case may be, it's sometimes it comes back by another concussion. You lose memory and you get it back, So whatever the case may be, I got some honey. I gotta put in some honey. So I gotta salute the farmers, firefighters, truckers. I gotta be thinking about the nurses of the Collective North American Civilizational Complex. Now I gotta give them some salutations, even though I wish I could afford a massage therapy session, which I can't. I'm gonna call for the Wall Street, the millionaires, the billionaires to finance. Please finance the public workers. Some massage therapy sessions. They deserve it. I'd earn it more than yours truly. Those nurses and the doctors and the public workers who pick up the garbage, the sanitation. Tomorrow is going to be picked up, the recycling tomorrow morning, Monday, because it's Sunday the 1st of June today. So I got to salute as I call for the North American Union, the North American Collective, part of my dream, the Dancing Goddess and the Dragon Kingdom, which is of course fundamentally a call for a public-private partnership to of course incorporate and implement my trinity of theories, the CIT, Citizen Integration Theory, the DRT, Death Fusion Theory, and the DFT, the Democratic Fusion Theory. That trinity of theories to be implemented via the fourth dimension, love, across what I call the North American Collective, and of course across the 10 provinces, 50 states, and 3 territories. And I gotta give some salutations to the firefighters in Manitoba, LOV. I'm gonna dedicate this to the Manitoba firefighters fighting the wildfire fighters. I gotta send some love in and raise the cup and sending some big love. I wish I would there on the field and we would have the Dragon Army, which I'm calling the Dragon Army to be a public-private partnership, aka the North American Integrated SSD, Security Service and Defense, based on my new 911 protocols for the total SSD, total security, total service, total defense, and the rejuvenation, reintegration of the criminal population into the procedure of the building of the construction of those 44 tunnels in case of a thermonuclear war, which we need to get ASAP on the work. So we got a lot of work to do, and I'm all about work, arbeit, travail. But the paradox is that Aspies, there is a very high unemployment rate in Aspies. The Aspie community, the unemployment rate is super high. It's between 60% and 80%. So the majority of the population is between 4 and 5 and 6 and 7%. So Asperger's, people with Aspie, it's 11 times higher. 11 times. Can you imagine? 11 times higher. So because there's a lot of work to be done demystifying what Asperger's is, because it's not a mental illness, but a lot of it is considered to be a mental illness, and a lot of people, quote unquote, might want to punish Asperger's or try to correct or medicate, but there's no medication for Asperger's due to the brain mutations. And we have our strengths, we have our weaknesses. In the social interactions we can be very weak, and I certainly lost a lot of friends over the past 7 years. But friends with benefits only from now on. Friends with benefits only. And I am androgynous, pansexual, 50-50, and love that BDSM switch. But you got to be an adult. You got to be 18 plus. I'm going to card you just like when you go buying alcoholic products and beverages, or if you want to go get here, it's legal, coast to coast, ocean to ocean. That cannabis, weed, marijuana, it's legal since 2019. We have shops here in Quebec. The best here in Quebec is found to be found, the best cannabis and marijuana. I don't smoke myself much, but very rarely it's in a blue moon. I still have leftovers from more than 4 years ago when I last purchased during COVID. And just I'm gonna proceed to card you, just like you go to a club, or when you get that weed, or when you go buy booze or cigarettes, whatever the case may be. That's how I'm gonna watch. You gotta be 18 plus. You wanna do some loving. So friends with benefits only. Pledge your allegiance to our family. Friends with benefits only. Pledge your allegiance to our family. Friends with benefits only. Pledge your allegiance to our family. And that's what we gotta go doing. And I'm gonna give a shout out to the firefighters in Manitoba. Gonna sing some rock and roll for them, because that's one of my special interests, parallel to geopolitics, rock and roll, and sports and fitness. 24/7 I'm involved, either in working out, training, exercising, dancing, creating dance choreography, rock and roll songs. I can rap a little bit as well. And of course it's geopolitics 24/7. I am an independent geopolitical theoretical analyst and theorist. And I gotta say, of course, that I take great pride in my geopolitical work, and you have to have a little bit of knowledge of geopolitics if you want to enter the arena. This is, of course, a special Mystik geopolitics and a little rock and roll and Mystik affairs, which we're going to discuss in the coming whatever minutes, and whatever the capabilities, whatever the time allotted, or however I feel to do it today, untimed, unscheduled, and pretty raw, as I got that YouTube work for the YouTube channel, which I'm doing. So pledge your allegiance to our family. Saluting the truckers on the road, truckers, butchers, bakers, nurses, doctors, firefighters, plumbers, and of course all those doing the construction work, which is going to start, of course, the public workers changing the aqueducts, the sewers. We got that good water, to get that clean water to get drinking atop of the mountain, where I'm calling, of course, Donald Trump and the leaders of the 10 provinces, 50 states and 3 territories for the dancing goddess and the dragon kingdom, which is fundamentally a call for a public-private partnership across the collective North American civilization. Pledge your allegiance to our family. And of course you see the Quebec flag, Canadian flag, and there you can see it in the back. I got the USA flag there. It's not that visible, but I guess you can see it there when you see the new table. So I got that US flag, right there is the USA flag. So, and there's the Canadian flag. So we gotta get that Canada, United States, and the dragon flag. And of course I got that dragon flag, which I got when I crossed that trip. That trip when I crossed Canada coast to coast really changed my life in 2017. So I took it down because I wanted to wash it, but I guess I'm gonna bring it with me, because I came here really with nothing. When I moved here, and I think either 9 years, I have to check, but it might be that July 1st is going to be 10 years since I live here. 10 years. And where I used to live was really like a prison cell, really like a slimy, dirty, moldy prison cell. But I guess I serve my time, I guess I serve my time. And that means to say that I've written lots of philosophical initiatives for the North American Collective, mainly and mostly for the North American Collective. It can be expanded to the NATO complex, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization complex, and then for world peace. But the point is that back in 2019, October, November, myself, I have, and I got proof for what I'm about to say because I got the videos online on YouTube. So I had predicted an international conflagration of a major scale. In other words, a World War III, World War III type of situation, type of scenario. The World War III. I predicted it in 2019, and there was a probability, 50-50 probability of a nuclear nuclear war, but the higher probability was for the use of biological weapons, which I estimated about 2/3, meaning about 66.666%, because that's the paradox of the mathematical principles. Because when you got 1/3, right, 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 equals 3 on 3, so that's 100%. It's always 100% when you go in fractions, otherwise you go over 100%. And when you separate in a third, the paradox is that it's 33.33333, and it keeps on going 333 on infinitum. So when you add the 33.33333, they don't add up to 100. You have to make it into fractions to add up, because otherwise it's 99.99999. But of course, what you do with the decimal is you round it up. That's a little bit of mathematical kind of cool mathematics, and I'm not an expert. I'm not a big genius in mathematics, but I love percentages and fractions, but pretty much percentages. My mathematical in percentiles and kind of percentages and ratio. I guess I just love percentages. I kind of go crazy when it comes with converting numbers into percentages and comparisons of over percentage. So, for example, now I would say, how much is the percentage for the water that I put in here, because I don't know exactly how much water I put, and the milliliters or the grams in milliliters or grams, and I guess it's milliliters, for the honey. So how much is the ratio? So it'd probably be less than 1%, because compared to the water, so that's the percentage, or I mean, in the increase. For example, I give you a concrete example, what I love, and I guess what I'm above average at is comparing percentages. For example, let's say the price is increasing. So, for example, I used to buy these wafers, which were 175 grams. So these 175 grams wafers were $1 about 4 years ago. So I bought the same wafers, because I love wafers, over and over again for years and years and years, until about last year they finally went from $1 to $1.25, right? Like a year and a half ago. So if they were $1, that means that if 25 cents for the dollar that you divide by 100 by 25 it's 4, right? So you get 1 out of 4. So that's 1 out of 4. 25 represents in fractions 1 out of 4. That means that it's equal to 25%, because it's 0.25 in decimals, but that's always 1 is always equal 100, the whole unit, which is the whole unit for the dollar for the 175 gram wafers. That means that it's an increase of 25%. But of course, if the salaries do not increase by the same proportion, that means that the cost of living has the negative effect on the majority of the population, in comparison to their incomes, or their monthly, weekly, bi-weekly incomes. So that's why we have in Canada, United States, and a lot of the places in the world, the cost of living increases. Because take a look, of course, if you take a look at the prices of gas. Prices of gas in 2020, February, the average price of gasoline was 93 cents. February 2020, beginning of COVID. Now the average of last year was around 156 in February for the whole year. About 156. Sometimes it's 154, sometimes it's 160, so it averages to about 156. So if you subtract 156, $1.56 is equal to 156 cents, right? Because it's $1.56 minus 93. So that means that you're left with 7 out of the 100, and then you add it to the 56, that's 63. So about an average increase of 63 cents. But if you put that 63 over the 93, which was the average in February, so you see that is the increase. That 63 cents in the past 5 years is just the increase. But if you put it over the average 93 cents and the 63, you see that it's more than 66.6%. It's more than 66.6%. It's more than 66.6%. So that's just how my brain I guess because I love percentages, I have an above average skill in mostly percentages. I guess other mathematics, calculus, and all that, not perhaps that good, but these percentages, calculation, and knowing the price ratios and the increase in the average of percentiles, yeah, that's pretty good. I'm pretty good at that, and I like doing it, and I could do it all day, and I do it every day. I do it in my mind as it's part of geopolitics, right? So economics, finances, the cost of living, which affects the morale of a population, the well-being and the morale of a population. The well-being and the morale of a population is, of course, a geopolitical factor. The joy, the happiness index, and the morale. To like, what are we fighting for? I got freedom tatted there. Freedom, freedom. Don't I don't. So according to my journals, I had I had got this tattooed in New York City, according to the journals. But mostly my life prior to me moving here is from what I've written in journals. Like I got Canada tatted up there, so I always get the flag. Yeah, putting now flags everywhere more and more with the trade war, but you know, I got it always on me, Canada. So I don't remember having when I got this one, probably more than 20 years ago. But here I am, pretty happy, pretty joyous, and we're not going to diverge. We're going to go straight into my topic of geopolitics. So, the geopolitical arena, again, I go back to 2019 when I predicted that there's going to be an international conflagration on the horizon. So, several levels of in-depth analysis, but mostly and mainly, first and foremost, the main points to retain, to remember from my analysis was that common factor, common denominator was fact that due to the unresolved conflicts from the 20th century, which of course predated from the 20th century during the Cold War period, which of course lasted more than 44 years between 1947 and 1991, from March 1947 till about end December 1991, when the perestroika, also known as the dissolution of the Soviet Union by Gorbachev, who was the chief chairman of the Communist Party of Russia, the Socialist Communist USSR, the United Socialist Soviet Republics. So due to those unresolved conflicts in the 20th century, that they're going to recommence in the 21st century. And for the most part, that's what you see across the world. Russia, Ukraine is pretty much an unresolved 20th century Cold War period era conflict. Also, fundamentally, Israel Hamas, Israel Palestine, or Israel and Israeli Arab conflict, if you will, how you want to term it, is pretty much refers to the wars and the conflicts between Israel and Arab neighbor states. The Hamas organization was, of course, founded in the 1980s during the Cold War, during the Cold War period, which lasted almost 45 years. I go with the 44 years and 9 months. Some say a bit more, a bit less, but pretty much between 44 years and 45, 40, it's placed. There's some disagreements about exact dates, but it's pretty much between at the beginning of 1947 and at the end of 1991. So how you want to frame it, the Cold War period. So pretty much a few generations, lasted a long time, the Cold War, almost 45 years. So those conflicts, of course, also China, Taiwan on the horizon. It's an unresolved conflict dating from the 20th century. So India, Pakistan also, it dates exactly from the splitting of India, Pakistan, and India after the British Empire ended, and of course India got the independence from Gandhi's successful march towards Indian statehood and Indian independence in 1947. And India, Pakistan, just a few weeks ago, they were almost had a conflict, a nuclear armed conflict. So, because they have nuclear weapons, they are estimated to have more than 156 each, about between 100 and 200 nuclear warheads each. So it was potentially a nuclear one as well. So they also have the Kashmir situation, which was not fully resolved. So when you discuss geopolitics, these unresolved conflicts are always something to take into consideration. I always bring it to myself being a Quebecer, Canadian, North American, fundamentally a North American, because and as much as I know and I have readings and I read and I study geopolitics and geopolitical every day. I watch local news, Quebec local news and Canadian news and United States news, CNN, Fox, and in the left and in the right and in the center and overseas. I'm fundamentally North American, so my education is of course much in the libraries here. And I think if I bless, I think if I retrieve the books, if I retrieve the books from the archives. I think I've took so many books over the years from the National Library, but whatever the case may be, mostly about, I think it will be 90% about geopolitics, right? Politics, history, economics, all these factors of geopolitics, because economics, culture, history, language, linguistics, they're all part of the geopolitical. It's a whole universe, a geopolitics, meaning that if we can define it, geos, from the Greek geos, and politikos, from a geolocation and geography, and politics from the Greek word polity, meaning a nation state organized to govern, governance, right? Related to governments and laws and traditions and jurisprudence and philosophy. And here as a Quebecer, I try to sometimes, as much as my brain can be complex, and especially when it comes to geopolitics and intellectual and academic, sometimes I break it down that I live in vive et laissez vivre, like we have here the saying in Quebec, and a little bit of the le bon samaritain, as much as I can, the good Samaritan, the bon samaritain, which is kind of cultural here in Quebec. Culture is, we have great culture, and here in North America we made what I call the Great Linguistic Compromise. The Great Linguistic Compromise for the great North American civilizational collective continuity of the peace, to have peace and harmony in what I call the North American civilizational complex, because we're a civilizational complex which is emergent, which is emergent, not fully divorced but distinct from Western civilization. So it's an emergent geopolitical complex, or a geopolitical or a civilizational complex, a North American civilizational collective, meaning that with Canada, United States, and even Mexico, because it's part of the North American civilization of North America, not just Mexico, but the islands. Cuba is a paradox because they maintain the Marxist, Leninist, socialist, communist mode system of governance, one party communist socialist state. And Haiti, Dominican Republic, they're part of the North American civilizational complex. So my theories, my protocols are first and foremost for what I call the Jamaica as well, and the islands, Barbados and several islands in the Caribbean islands are part of North America, right? So this North American civilizational complex is a new emergent civilizational complex which is not totally divorced but is distinct from Western civilization. So those things you have to keep in mind and relate, and keep in mind that that's the factual truth about the North American civilizational complex, that we have these appellations and these common denominators which make us a collective civilizational complex. And one of those common denominators is the Great Linguistic Compromise, to have the continuity of the peace and harmony here in North America across the 10 provinces, 50 states, 3 territories, of the French language, the Quebecois. Myself, a Quebecois Canadian North American, personally is my home here in the island, in this life and in a past life. And this is my home personally. I do not consider myself a member of a diaspora, and I wish world peace and I can be universal. And that everybody who come to join us here in the new North American Civilizational Collective, I treat them as my family, and to the best of our abilities and energies and competencies and skills, with equal justice. And I live here in the neighborhood. My neighbors are black neighbors, and we try to fight some racism, because my black brothers and sisters constitute of the 13.3, 13.4, more than 44 million of the North American population are my brothers and sisters who are blacks, here my neighbors included. So what I put on the table is, of course, some hugs and kisses and money I don't have to finance, but I wouldn't be hesitant to finance, my brothers and sisters who are blacks, if they would be in a financial precarious situation or financial struggle, anything like that, because a lot of people deserve second and even third chances, so. But again, we're individuals, part of the collective, so it's always the individual and the collective, and that's why I'm a democratic Republican. Fundamentally, my universal revolutionary centrism is tied hand in hand and inseparable from my holy trinity of theories, which I'm calling for the implementation, for the regeneration and the SSD, total security, total service, total defense, coast to coast, ocean to ocean, Montreal to San Francisco, and of course open to Mexico if they will, to make the Great North American Pact on Montreal, Hawk Island, HAWK, Hawk Island, Montreal, and Mount Royal, the Belvedere, Conjurenog Mountain. When I march the mountain from my place every day, almost. Sometimes I go by the river, by the mountain, or by the city, but I go at least a few times a week to my second home, and I love going there. And please don't pollute if you go there. It's a place where we try to preserve. And just the other day I was discussing with a fellow citizen, and we had some discussions, and then the environmental question came, and I said, let's take a look. And we took a look together. We opened the garbage bin, and what do we see? We see three cans that have to go into recycling. We see paper that has to go into recycling. We see a Ziploc bag it's made of plastic. It has to go into recycling. But it takes the individual effort, right? It also takes the individual effort. If individuals and the collective, it's always do, give. And I'm a pro-labor and love universal revolutionary centrist. I'm a pro-labor and love universal revolutionary centrist because my brothers and sisters, ain't no way that we have millionaires and billionaires, and with the increasing cost of living, please give some charity. And if you have capital, mass finance. That's why I have been and will call for the mass finance of fitness to implement the workout training program system, which I've created back in 2019, which I'm very proud to have created right here in this room office and temple, which myself have performed more than 372 sessions. More than 272 sessions of the General Integrated Total Body Training System, which is an efficient, effective workout training program system, which requires no equipment. And I created it back here, right here in this room, office, and temple. And that's why we have to implement and we have to encourage citizens to workout, train, exercise. It's something that I love to do. And now I have another cup of, this is not the tea, I'm gonna drink Double Trouble. It just has these red type of berries in it, so it's just kind of water. So I'm gonna get a little bit of that hydration. I guess I need to drink a lot because I work out a lot during the weekdays, and I keep a very fit, active lifestyle. And the fitness of the individual and the collective is part of our geopolitical interests. That's why I'm calling my brother Scorpio, Bill Gates, and all the tech powers that be, all the public, private. Here I am, a nobody, sometimes a piece of dust, but I have the dream, and the dream is the Dancing Goddess and the Dragon Kingdom, where one of the points is to mass finance citizens' fitness. We build new servers, and make a deal with Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and all public and private TV operations and governments and institutions to mass finance citizens. I'll do my workout on millions of Americans, and my brothers and sisters, Canadian American here, was born in the United States 3 times, so we can fuse. And my vision for fusing best, get rid of the border. We gotta get rid of the border. I'm no Trump supporter. I don't support Trump's many policies, but I am for the integration and fusion of Canada, United States. My vision best, PPP best, because we got each other coast to coast, ocean to ocean. And my brothers and sisters, Canadians, the king is absent. The king is absent. The king is an absentee landlord. Peace and be well, but we got coast to coast, ocean to ocean. Coast to coast, ocean to ocean. If you see my vision, what we can be, and all who come to join us here, of course, I open my arms to all. But I am hyper vigilant myself. I don't like violence. Even the other day, I don't like violence, but I understand aggression, and I guess I have it in me as well, aggression and intensity and focus, but I channel it to work out, and I play that defense, because I am hyper vigilant. I live being attacked by surprise, so a few times in the past years, a long time ago. But I guess almost try to get rid of me, try to kill me, I guess. But they got that unsuccessful attempts, and and I played that defense, and here I am. I will to love and see others love, and my rehabilitation. And of course, I gotta give a shout out to an Aspie who gifted me via PayPal $25.44 a few months ago, October last year, 2024, $25.44, and I put it to good use. I bought the most affordable bottle of wine on the market. I bought some bacon and some bread, so I got food with the money. And I'm financially stressed, but I'm always open for work. And unfortunately, in the Asperger's community, which is again not a mental illness, a very high unemployment rate, more than 11%. And Aspie's, I myself had a lot of employments, a lot of jobs, but there's tendency not to keep them for long, a few weeks, a few months, and because socially we're awkward, we're weird. We might, for example, take an object and look so close at it, look at the details, where it's made, how many grams, and then I calculate the proportion, the price cost per unit, and a little bit of mathematics. Sometimes I guess when I go in the store and I check, and I've been doing this for years, and for years and years I've been told by several people and diagnosed, I guess, but in a unofficial manner. But I have Asperger's, and I didn't accept it because it's like kind of stigma, because there's still a lot of misunderstandings about what Asperger's is, and I didn't want to like wear the stigma, the label, the mark. You're an Aspie, you're different than I am, but I don't like violence myself, and it's just ask. I'm androgynous pansexual and have been in the open 50-50 for years and years. I'm a man, a woman, a woman, a man. I'm that 50-50, just like I'm a Democratic Republican 50-50 centrist, pro-labor and love, universal revolutionary centrist. And I'm gonna just light a little bit of that incense now and get a little bit of that incense for the go. And we gotta go on that rock and roll. And I gotta go for a minute. I'll be back. I'm just gonna pause it and gonna come back in just a few seconds because I'm just gonna go to the washroom real quick, and then we're gonna get back to geopolitics, and that's what we're gonna get doing on that. And that's what we gotta get on the rock and roll for the butchers, bakers, nurses, doctors, grocery store clerks, and all those involved in the production, distribution of food. That's what we're gonna get doing now. We're back, we're back, we're back in the rock and roll. We're gonna light some incense, because it's past 3 o'clock. So, for the goddess, forgotten goddess temple, which I will to build the temple. Gonna come back to that for the goddess. I'm gonna auction these lighters, by which I'm gonna light, God and goddess, one lighter for the god, one flame for the god, one for the goddess, man. Gotta get that. So I gotta give a little bit of shout out again to my anonymous friend. I got these socks. I haven't worn them yet. Did I? No, I haven't worn them yet. I'm gonna wear them to dance in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead, and auction them for me. And greatest socks I ever had. And these ones also. I didn't wear them. These ones I'm gonna wear them to workout training them. This is for dancing. It's the priestess, Hana, priestess, H-N-A-H, Hana. This one is dragon. Rainbow dragon, so 2 in 1. So we're gonna get 2 in 1, So, gonna get it doing, so that's what we're gonna get doing it there. So that's what we're gonna go do, Gonna get doing with that, and one for dancing as the priestess, Hana, and one for working out training as dragon. General Hana, that's what we're gonna get doing with that, and we're gonna get it on the rock and roll for that go XYZ, and that's what we're gonna get on the love, man. I love red, my favorite color is red, and that's what we gotta get doing, for the dragons, for the Dragon Army, which I'm calling the formation, of course, via the total SSD and my new 911 protocols, which I've written a few years ago. Started after I came out of that depression when I crossed Canada coast to coast, and of course, the new 911 Dragon Army protocols for total security, total service, total defense, and of course via the implementation of Operation Northern Scorpion, and of course the implementation of my total mobile defense theory, which is of course of great geopolitical importance, the total T, total mobile MTM, total mobile defense theory, TMDT, total mobile defense theory, and to that 4-letter acronym, when we add the S for the system total mobile defense theory, when we add the system total mobile defense theory system, that means that usually it's the 5th S is in parentheses. That means that the system is put into practice, and we implement it across the 10 provinces, 50 states, and 3 territories for the 63, and we need to get rid of the border and create a common passport, common currency, and get the total SSD and build the forgotten goddess, GODDSS is gonna be that goddess as well, and that's what my will to build the forgotten goddess temple, and on the Canadian US border, the North American People's Imperial Coliseum, the North American People's Imperial Coliseum, the North American People's Imperial Coliseum. That's what I want to build, and that's what I'm challenging Donald Trump. I'm gonna put these back. I'm gonna put these back, and that's what we're gonna get doing with that, and that's what we're gonna get doing. We're gonna put it back there, and that's what we're gonna get doing for the love. We're gonna get on the love side of things. And, that's what we're gonna get doing, the North American People's Imperial Coliseum. That's what we're gonna get doing, and I will to build now that I'm on the topic. Where public-private partnership, the biggest ever sports complex arena. Construction workers from Canada, United States. I gotta send some love into the construction workers. Gotta put on the table. I got a new table, more than blah blah blah. Gotta put some washing at the feet, some massages, and some rock and roll with that. Some kisses. I got trillions of kisses. Got 718 trillions of kisses, but the kisses I've laid the foundations for the dancing goddess in the dragon kingdom. Pledge your legions, and kisses, and of course, lots of geopolitics and the philosophies, and lots of marching steps, and lots of dancing, because dancing is my favorite sport. But my will to build the four, I'm just gonna discuss now my will to build the four. So my will to build the four is to build the Forgotten Goddess, GODDSS temple, Forgotten Goddess temple, goddess. Because I created me surviving being depressed, being suicidal, survived me being attacked by surprise when I was bloodied up, hit my head, and had a dislocated right arm. I have to go retrieve those from the Jewish General Hospital. Then, of course, also have to keep in mind that I have to go check the I have to give credit to the goddess so for surviving COVID. That's what I get, the surviving of that COVID. And I survived COVID right here in this room, office and temple. I thought I was gonna die, and I survived it right here in this room, office and temple. And ever since I survived COVID, I live it carpe diem every day, like it would be my last day every day, But I have hope for the future, and the hope is embodied when I see people hugging, working out, training, exercising, holding hands, and that gives me hope. When I march to the mountain and go work out, and I see people giving a little bit of kiss to each other and holding hands, and joyous youth, and people just being a little bit more understanding and loving. Because as much as I understand, especially since I'm a geopolitical theoretical theorist, as much as I understand peace through strength, I understand peace through strength. I certainly do, especially in this tough, more dangerous world. I understand it, but I don't fully support it. I cannot fully support just peace through strength. It has to be counterbalanced by some love and understanding, because strength is not just enough to decide on strength and force every decisions of the North American civilizational collective. We have to have some love and understanding, just like myself as an individual who's can be seen as weird, awkward, and strange, and who's lost lots of friends, lots of business and economic opportunities, but who's here, been accepting my Asperger's, being that I'm an Aspie for the past years, and I have to work on the characteristics to always try to build bridges between myself, part of this tiny small fraction of the population of a minority of 0.44%, and the rest of the population, whoever they may be, across the North American collective, the 44 million of Canadians plus 340 million of my brothers and sisters in the 50 states, and of course furthermore Mexico is part of North America. So as I make that statement, I'm going to discuss again what I will to build, and construction workers, Dragon Ninja, priestess of the goddess, HNNH, you got to get those kisses, hugs, and feet washing with that. And I will to build the Forgotten Goddess Temple, and of course the North American People's Imperial Coliseum to be 11 times bigger than the Caesar Superdome, Louisiana Superdome, where was of course back, and of course where the 49ers a few years ago lost by 3 points, not by much, to the Baltimore Ravens a few years ago, more than a decade ago, more than 11 years ago. One of my top 5 Super Bowls is the Harbor Bowl, aka Blackout Bowl, aka the Bro Bowl, several nicknames, and it was played in Louisiana, New Orleans, and of course there's the Caesar Superdome. It changed names. A few years ago it was known as the Mercedes-Benz Dome. It's a big Coliseum arena, NFL arena, And before that it was Louisiana Superdome. It was built a long time ago, and it was rebuilt and reconstructed and re-engineered, and of course there was lots of renovations being done and made enhancements and upgrades and over the decades, many decades. But it's a major one. It can hold more than 75,000 citizens to the venue, the capacity of the population is more than 75,000, and of course is where one of my top 5 Super Bowls was played, and lots of Super Bowls were played there, but one of my top 5 Super Bowls is where my 49ers lost by 3 points, known as the Harbaugh Ball, aka Blackout Ball, aka Harbaugh Ball, Bro Ball, or Blackout Ball. So he got several nicknames, just like I got several nicknames, General Rainbow Dragon, General Dragon Zero, first and foremost, Dragon Zero, nobody's born a dragon, not even myself with a surname Dragon. Took blood, sweat, and tears to turn that A into a no. Nobody's born a dragon, you become one. And also known as aka Limb Dig Dicklet, aka General Greatest Cuckold of the Universe, aka Greatest Cuckold of the Universe, Greatest Cuckold, C-U-C-K of the universe. Several nicknames I go by, but that's about one. And bury me with Papa Crowley, a third of me up in New Jersey, a third of me up in Mount Royal and Belvedere, Conjurnac, one third of me at the Belvedere, Conjurnac, one third of me sent to the city of the pyramids, one third of me sent to the city of the pyramids, one third of me sent to the city of the pyramids, send one third of me to the city of the pyramids in Cairo, near Cairo, Egypt, and split it one third, that's about it with that. So I will to build the Forgotten Goddess Temple, and on the Canadian-US border, the North American People's Imperial Coliseum, the biggest ever sports for 24/7 sports in perpetuity. Sportis in perpetuitis is going to be the Latin motto. Continual sports. Continuous for sports, 24/7 events. In the morning, at night, 24/7 sports events where truckers can take a pit stop and get some discounts on the way, where the people can go and get sports and work out, train, exercise, open to all. It's going to be a public-private partnership. It's going to be, let's build it 11 times bigger than the Caesar Superdome. 11 times bigger, 11 times the biggest ever built sports arena complex for sports in perpetuities, for all the universities, for all the sports leagues of the 63 of the North American Collectif, to have dancing, boxing, fitness activity. Dancing is my favorite sport. I love boxing, I love fitness, but I don't like violence much, so sometimes I watch the other sports, but it could be also because it's consent for UFC, and you channel the aggression, and then you hug at the end, and good job. I guess we keep a sportsmanship and get a good hug, and that's about how we're gonna play the reconciliation and the unity of the North, true North, strong and free. We gotta add some loving in that, the North with the South, because basically we're gonna fuse the North and the South. We're gonna fuse the North and the South. We're gonna fuse the North and the South in my dream, the dancing goddess and the dragon kingdom. So let's build. And the first event, the inauguration event, is gonna be Dragon versus Trump, and I'm gonna keep these gloves. I guess I did a lot of training in them, so they're a little bit bruised, battered, just like myself, with the scars and bruises and lots of scars, internal, external, trauma that I survived over the years. But here I am, joyous, and grateful, and I'm gonna be able to pay my rent. Already paid my electricity bill. Already paid that electricity bill. So I already paid that electricity bill, and of course already paid it, and got these gloves, and that's what we're gonna do on that. And we're gonna get on those inauguration event, Dragon versus Trump. We're going to inaugurate on the Canadian-US border. Have been and will continue to challenge Donald Trump to a boxing match on the Canadian-US border ever since 2018, when Donald Trump imposed tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel. When Donald Trump imposed tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel back, of course, in 2018. So it's been a long time. And initially I was asking and building the construction in 2018, 2019, 2020 to build a rink made of Canadian aluminum and steel, Canadian-US joint steel, because first Donald Trump imposed tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel, which was pretty much a mistake. So let's build that, the Forgotten Goddess Temple, the North American People's Imperial Coliseum, which is going to be 11 times bigger than the Coliseum, once, of course, the Coliseum, which was built, of course, on the Canadian-US border, which we will build on the Canadian-US border, is going to be 11 times bigger than the Harbaugh, where the Harbaugh Ball, aka Blackout Ball, was played. Of course, when my 49ers lost by 3 points, but that's what it's going to get doing with that, and that's what we're going to be building, So that's what we're going to be building, and of course, we're going to be building the pyramid, House of the Dragon, scarlet, crimson, red, scarlet and crimson, there's shades of red, scarlet and crimson, there's shades of red. And also we're going to be building the Rainbow People's Palace for my fellow LGBTQ community and fellow neurodivergent community. So that's the four I want to build. So we got to get a lot of work. But that's all I'm about is work, and arbeit, trabajo, trabajo. With that, friends with benefits only, please. Friends with benefits only, please. And pledge your allegiance. Thou art family. Pledge your allegiance. Thou art family. Pledge your allegiance. Thou art family. PPP, public-private partnership, the dream dancing goddess dragon kisses I got by the trillions, So you gotta be 18 plus for loving your truly androgynous pansexual Aspie artist. Let's build the 4 Forgotten Goddess Temple. GODDSS it every day. Forgotten Goddess, the North American people's imperial. The goddess doesn't need me to build. She's got her temples, the pyramids, the tombs and temples, the pyramids, the tombs and temples, the pyramids, the tombs and temples, the pyramids. She's got those, and it's gonna be long after my dust is settled, and it's gonna still have those pyramids, goddess. I always joke that men can't figure out how the pyramids were built because they were built by women. And that's what it is with that, and that's what we gotta get doing on the go, and we gotta get the formulation to get it on the love side of things, and we gotta get those incentives, and we gotta move towards for today and for tomorrow, and the geopolitical events of today, of course, are many ways parallel to what I predicted, and again help support build the 4 Forgotten Goddess Temple, the North American People's Imperial Coliseum, and to be 11 times bigger than the Harbor Ball, where the Harbor Ball was played, and of course the other one to be build the North American People's Imperial Coliseum, the Forgotten Goddess Temple, and of course to build the House of the Dragon, pyramid, scarlet, red, crimson, scarlet, our shades of red, and of course whatever the case may be to go doing, and that's how we gotta get doing on the go, and we gotta get doing on the loving side of things, and we gotta get a little bit of that implementation to get a little bit on the mystic side of things, a little bit coming, and I'm gonna discuss a bit of mysteries of the Bible in a bit. But gonna get back to geopolitics because my brain now was inclined since this morning. I said I'm gonna rest, but I wasn't. I just had to do a little bit of analysis of the news, and of course the major news is from a North American interest perspective. And I gotta say before I proceed, this statement which I'm gonna make now is a yes, 100%. There's no or maybe in this following geopolitical reality statement which I'm gonna make. So there's no maybe and there's no yes. There's no maybe or no. There's only yes to this following statement. Us as Canadians, Quebecers, our main interest, geopolitical interest, is to have the best, most cordial, friendly, economic, social, political, geopolitical, cultural, sports, fitness, defense, security, service, whatever it is with the United States. That is our main and foremost interest, principal interest, regardless of anything other than the exterior to whatever the case may be, so that's what it is with that, and that's what we got to get doing. So our main interest, geopolitical interest, my Uncle Carney and whoever is my Uncle Legault and aunties and uncles in Parliament, and the King is absent. It's time for the Republic, and it's time for the Democratic Republic, the North American Union, the Dream, the Dancing Goddess, Public-Private Partnership, fusion of the North and the South for the 63, the 10 provinces, 50 states, and 3 territories. Created a common currency, a common passport, and focusing on defense, coast to coast, ocean to ocean, because that's all we got. And we need to get in the Golden Dome, and we need to put a Hawk, H-A-W-K, in it, and we need to support it and have right here and across the mountains. And of course, I have a proposition which I'm working, of course, on in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead to propose so that, of course, Quebec be defended, because the ICBM rockets from Russia can travel 10,500 kilometers. So Montreal to Moscow is 8,500 kilometers. Moscow to Montreal is 8,500 kilometers. Montreal to Moscow is 8,500 kilometers. So of course they can travel all the way, of course, from Moscow to Montreal, and they can reach internal in the Canadian United States. They can reach. Supposedly, NATO, according to the NATO intelligence, military intelligence of NATO, they can travel 10,500 kilometers. The Yars-24 and the Satan 2, I believe, let's call nicknames. The nicknames of the ICBM rockets, the Intercontinental Ballistic Missiles, ICBM Intercontinental Ballistic Missiles. That's what ICBM acronym stands for, Intercontinental Ballistic Missiles. Supposedly they can travel all the way to Montreal because they can travel 10,500 kilometers. So if from Moscow to Montreal it's only 8,500, that means 10,500 minus 8,500 is 2,000 kilometers. So they can still go further west, for the west, because from Montreal is the east, right? That's in the back of me is the east. I'm facing the west now, and that's the south. That's the north. North. Correction. South is that way. North is that way. North is that way. North, south, west, east in the back of me. So if I go by if it's shot by the east, they can travel and come right in Montreal. They can land on Montreal Island. Because Montreal is a big populated center, 2.5 million people, top 10. It's about 7th or 8th in North America, even when it includes Mexico City, when Mexico City now is the first. So Montreal is an island of about 2.5 million people. So it's like a small country, and a small country of 2.5 million people. And of course, surrounded areas is about 4.5 million people, the metropolitan area, if we could take into consideration. So we really got to get into that hog dome, and we got 44 plus million Canadians to protect. So we got to get in that deal, the Golden Dome project. I was calling it, even before Trump, I was calling for the creation of a similar defense system. As you can retrieve, go back to my many marches which I did during COVID, hundreds of marching videos, and especially in the past weeks, months, and especially last year as well, as the deterioration of relations has continued with China and Russia, both Canada and United States, and the solidification of the the China-Russia alliance has continued to solidify. And I am only for defense. You have to understand that I'm only for defense. And pretty much until we got the Dancing Goddess and the Dragon Armies on the Dragon Army for SSD, Public-Private Partnership Army, integrated across all levels of society of the North American civilizational complex, and of course for total security, total service, total defense, coast to coast, ocean to ocean for the 63. That is my proposition and call for many weeks and past months and years in the past, and that's what we have to get doing with that. We have to get doing on that. There's no way out of it. So we have to get doing on that implementation for total security, total service, total defense, and of course coast to coast, ocean to ocean is something which we have to implement and get the technicalities to be able, of course, to retrieve, of course, that we have to get the defense in case of ICBM rockets are fired, either from North Korea as well, for several places, China as well, they can be launched, China, North Korea, and Russia, and they can reach. So we have to put the hawk in the Golden Dome, put the Golden Hawk Dome, which includes that it's going to be included from Hawk Island, Montreal, which I call it HAWK, the Hawk, my totem bird, and that's what I'm calling for ASAP. So now I'm just going to discuss back to geopolitics. Our main interest, and this is a constant. In geopolitics, this is a constant, just like the pi number. The pi symbol, it's 3.1416, 1416, 1415, and it goes ad infinitum. So it continues, right? The pi for the circumference and the diameter of a circle. The circumference and the diameter of a circle. The circumference and the diameter of a circle reference is 3.14, 15, 16. So it always continues ad infinitum in the circular manner as it is. So the pi, it's always a constant. It's not a variable in mathematics. It's a constant. Inflexible, doesn't change. So for us, Canadians, Quebecers, Canadians, our first most important interest in geopolitical world, the first most important interest, politically, is to have the best, most cordial relations with the United States, economically, financially, governmentally, and of course, whatever the case may be, with that. So that is something which I gotta be saying, appellation to get it on the go, that we have to get it now understood fully, and Connie has to be aware of it. Uncle Prime Minister, of course, Legault has to be with it. Legault has to know that our first most important fundamental aspect and principle importance of the first foremost principle, important fundamental, of course, interest, our fundamental interest in geopolitics and in politics is, as Quebecer Canadians, to have the best, cordial, most important relations with my brothers and sisters in the United States. There's no maybe or no about this statement. This statement is yes, 100%, and that's reciprocal, vice versa. My brothers and sisters in the 50 states, your economic, geopolitical, social, political interest is to have the best, most cordial, friendly, diplomatic, economic, social, defense, security, cultural, sports-like with us Canadians. So it's reciprocal, it's vice versa. Just like the NHL, National Hockey League, and NBA, National Basketball Association, my dream is a binational, first and foremost, binational dream for Canada, United States, for the 63, just like the NHL is not really national. National Hockey League is not really national, and now we have Edmonton. Bring the cup back to Canada. Bring the cup back to Canada. Bring the cup back to Canada. Please bring the cup back to Canada, Edmonton. That's what I'm gonna say, and it's something which we gotta be doing, and that's something which we gotta be doing on that rock and roll, and that's why we have to get it on the done side of things, and we have to make a deal. And my deal, the dream, the dancing goddess and the dragon kingdom best. So once again, the first and most important statement, of course, is that fundamentally in the world of geopolitics, our most important geopolitical role and geopolitical interest as Quebecers, Canadians, is to have the best, most cordial relations with our brothers and sisters in the United States, and that's what we have to do there for the concordium of the importance of the things which we have to be doing, and we have to be doing, and we have to doing it ASAP, because this is a principle that doesn't change. It's just like the pi symbol in mathematics is a constant. So this geopolitical reality is a constant. That's just how it is. It's yes. As Quebecer Canadians, our number one priority of interest fundamentally is to have the best, most cordial relations with our brothers and sisters in the United States. Economic, financial relations, diplomatic, social, security, whatever the case may be with the United States. There's no maybe about it. There's no maybe. It's always yes. It's just like the pi symbol. It's constant. This is a geopolitical constant. It's yes, yes, yes. Meaning that our interest as Quebecer Canadians is to have the best economic, military, defense, security, social, cultural, sports relations with the United States, and vice versa for the United States. Is the same reciprocity, is the same applies for the United States. So that's why I'm inviting the leaders of the public-private partnership, all the economic, commercial leaders, commercial Wall Street, and of course the leaders of North America and the free world for that matter, first and foremost NORAD, Canada, United States, to the mountain to discuss furthermore, and of course to establish the public-private partnership, the dream, support the dream. I'm financially stressed, but I'm grateful, that I'm looking for every opportunity. I got to give a shout out to my fellow citizen who gave a little bit of opportunity and made $30 an hour, which was really good for me, $30 an hour. And I don't know if it's going to offer me that again. And I don't have to declare it because it's less than 200. But if I ever make money, the problem is because Aspie, sometimes we get offers and employments, and I worked a lot of different places in the past 7 years, more than 7 places, but short-lived, and I still applied. I'm waiting for see if I can do some work business with Canada Post. How's that going? And I'm generally a pro-labor and love universal revolutionary centrist, but my centrism is tied hand in hand with this, where we are now, because, my brothers and sisters, millionaires, billionaires, you need to finance the capital, and let's rebuild the North American inner urban cities. Let's rebuild the ghettos. Let's rebuild together the ghettos. Let's rebuild the ghettos of North America. I want to see an executive order for the rebuilding of the North American inner urban cities. Send an executive order for raising of the minimum wage, and of course for healthcare for all, and of course to rebuild the ghettos. Let's rebuild the ghettos. We got a lot of rebuilding here to do, and Dragon Army, we're gonna play only that defense, coast to coast, ocean to ocean, coast to coast, ocean to ocean. That's why many things of the geopolitical nature, many things I take a neutral perspective and a neutral position, because I predicted what's happening now in 2019, and until we have my complementary covenant and cooperative public-private partnership institutions, the Dragon Army, aka the North American Integrated SSD Legion, the Legion of the Dragon Army, to be only for SSD until further notice, only for SSD, for SSD. Drop down, give dragons some push-ups, and the Dancing Goddess Army, aka the North American Integrated Dance League, to be of course dancing for the environment, to clean the environment. It takes the individual effort again to do it myself, so because we gotta get doing with that. So please, if you don't put it in the garbage, if it's a can, plastic, or if it goes in the recycling, make sure it goes in the recycling, because I'm checking more and more now, there's items which should go in the recycling that go in the garbage, and vice versa. If it goes in the garbage, put it in the garbage. Try not to put it in the recycling, because it messes there. There's a negative detrimental effect. So we have to do our as individuals. And yes, sometimes myself I'm messy, sometimes I'm a mess. I got scars on the body, I got scars. There's certain things I have lacked, I've suffered, struggled, but here I am pretty much on the 1st of June, joyous, content, and it's workout, training, exercise, dancing, and rock and roll and geopolitics 24/7 with yours truly. And we need to implement the new protocols also for the North American criminal rehabilitation. So back to geopolitics again now. The tariffs, the Trump announced that the tariffs on aluminum and steel are going to be increased by 25%, which already raises it from 25% to 50%. because the court order was annulled, cancelled, that the tariffs were not legal. The tariffs were not legal. Struck down and reversed, so the tariffs are to be set in place. And of course, the utilization of the IEPA, International Economic Emergencies Powers Act, International Economic Emergencies Powers Act. The International Emergencies Economic Powers Act dates back to 1977. So I believe that for Canada, United States, my DRT theory best. So now that I'm on the DRT, I mentioned the DRT, I'm going to discuss it fully. I'm going to just hydrate so I can discuss it very good, in a very well manner, in a well delivered manner, the discussion of the DRT. So the DRT, the debt refusion theory, of course, stands for D, debt, R, refusion, T, theory. Of course, it is my theory for the North American Collective, and it's a paradox that I'm putting this theory of the North American Collective, because Canada, United States, binational. It's quite a paradox because I'm financially stressed and I'm not it's my main special interest is geopolitics, not necessarily finance or economics, but in geopolitics, economics, and finance are an integral part of geopolitical studies. Debt, the International Financial Economic Organization, the IMF, World Bank, and of course such events as the European integration, which I studied, and it's something that I'm going to mention now as a geopolitical event and reality. The creation of the ECB, the European Central Bank in Europe, is a major geopolitical development. It, of course, ended the 20th century and it began more in the 21st century. So that changing of the 21st century was the Europeans applying monetary integration theory. What? I can do it at 4:30. No, it's 3:30. No, I can do it around 5. Is that okay? Hold on, I gotta answer 24/7 service for my anonymous friend. Gotta answer something. All right, so at 5 I'm gonna cook at 5. Nothing big, nothing fancy, but I'm gonna take my anonymous friend for the beef. It's something that I'm gonna cook at 5. So 5 o'clock, so I got some time. I'm not gonna go a lot on it today, but I'm just going to discuss again the DRT, debt refusion to you. So super important. And again, I'm going to discuss a geopolitical event and reality, meaning that about the geopolitical reality and a great major geopolitical event that ended the 20th century and that began the 21st century in terms of worldwide, international, universal scope. So the Europeans, many countries, not all, in Europe, of course, they have implemented what's called monetary integration theory. And of course, in my DRT, in my debt refusion theory, has in it integrated monetary integration theory. In my DRT theory has monetary integration theory, integrated in it. So inside my DRT, debt refusion theory, is integrated monetary integration theory. So inside that theory, so inside my debt refusion theory is integrated monetary integration theory. So this is a major geopolitical event. So the Europeans, having created the ECB, the European Central Bank, has, of course, a great effect on how the geopolitical world has functions, because of course in several nation states, Germany, the Germans got rid of the Deutschmark, the Italians got rid of course their lira, the French got rid of their francs, and of course they got it on the go and they destroyed their national central banks. They got destroyed, and that's what they did, the creation of a common currency and a common central bank in the end of the 20th century, 1999, the common known as the ECB, the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank, of course, was created in the 90s. So, of course, it issues that currency, which is known as the euro. So that's what they did now. They did the implementation of course, the European Central Bank, and that's what they have to do, and that's what they did. That's what they did basically. And my DRT theory contains monetary integration theory, so it's of course super important that we gotta get implementing my DRT theory, because both the Canadian economic financial situation of course is the same as the United States financial situation. Most of the economy and the financial situation for the United States is similar to the Canadian one. Much is that the reality is today that we have record-breaking public debt. The individual citizen is of course over indebted. Or of course, on myself, I don't have credit cards, but of course credit cards are pretty much maxed out, and we have reports in the past weeks and past months and last year that we have record-breaking interest, which of course record-breaking credit card debt for both Canadians and my brothers and sisters in the USA. So both the Canadian and United States financial situation is pretty much fundamentally on the same parallel. Of course, also the public we have reached, because during the COVID era, coronavirus, which I survived myself, and I got triple vaxxed, and I encourage all to keep and maintain the protocols that were formulated and that were equilibrating on the COVID. Of course, the washing of the hands for the hand sanitizer, for the bacteria, the germs, and the microbes. Of course, I open carry my disinfectant when I go out in March, and clean. I please keep the protocols, the hygienic protocols, which of course were implemented during COVID, and of course which we have to continue to do our full diligence to keep and maintain the protocols, such as disinfecting and washing of the hands. And that's what we have to do. The keeping of the washing of the hands is something which is important, and especially disinfecting when you go to the ATM machine. And when you go to the ATM machine at the bank, keep in mind that many other people press the same buttons as you do, and you might get concordium to get a little bit of those microbes, bacteria, and germs. So super important to do that rock and roll and disinfect those hands with that germs, bacteria, and germs. That's what we have to be doing, and that's what we have to be doing that on the go. And we got to get it to do the best possible diligence as individual citizens, part of the collective, and responsibility as an individual when we go outside, myself included, that we have each other, me, added responsibilities, duties, and obligations which we normally do not have under the normal circumstances of life. And that's how we got to get doing on that. So the DRT, debt refusion theory. So once again, it integrates monetary integration theory, and a major geopolitical event of the world was the creation of the ECB. It's a great geopolitical event because that's the Europeans implementing monetary integration theory, which of course has been and is the adoption by different nation states, polities, different political entities and polities, adopting a common currency. That is a great geopolitical event which has and is of course of great value even today. The euro, of course, has skyrocketed because the Germans, they destroyed their national central banks, of course, of the European Central Bank, and the French, they destroyed their national central banks, and the Italians, they destroyed their national central banks, and of course, they created the ECB, the European Central Banks. That's what they did, and that's why we have to get that concordium to keep it up, to do the same here in the North American Collective via the implementation of the DRT, the debt refusion theory, of course, the debt refusion theory, which of course integrates monetary integration theory, and that's what we have to be implementing nowadays. And because the financial precarious situation, of course, many citizens are living in the financially precarious situation, of which we have to be doing, and that's how we have to be doing the DRT, debt refusion theory. We have to implement it now, ASAP. It's required in June. In coming days, it's possible that Monday, tomorrow, the 2nd of June, that there's a public financial collapse, a stock market crash with the new announcement of new tariffs, additional tariffs on steel, and the changing of the guard in the world economic affairs and the world affairs in terms of economics. But here for Canada, United States, we have to implement the DRT. So the debt refusion theory integrates monetary integration theory, and due to the record levels, and keep in mind that the financial mathematical principles apply both for the public debt, meaning how much interest is paid on the public debt and how much interest is paid on the individual debt. Of course, how much interest we have, myself included. If I would have credit cards, I don't have a credit loan, and I've got $10,000 in debt. It's 10.44% of interest, and that's what we have to be doing. And because of course we have record debt, and imagine that during the 5 years of COVID, since February 2020 till now February 2025, the interest we paid on the public debt of Canada has increased due to those programs which we had to implement for the maintaining of the population, to have the maintenance of the population and the systems, which of course to keep in place the population, the civilizational complex of North America. We had to implement programs that were emergency programs for citizens to be able to pay the rent during the lockdowns, and a lot of people were not working during the lockdowns, so the economy ceased to exist as we had known it prior. So basically, of course, the interest levels just the interest payments on the public debt have increased tremendously. We have to double check, verify the numbers over the past 5 years, but due to COVID, they had increased a big proportion. So of course, our GDP has not kept up by the same increase, only 1 or 2%, where the annual increase has increased 15, 18, 25 or more percent every year for a few years during the COVID period. So just as an individual whose salary stagnates or only increases by 5 or 10 or 15%, while the interest increases over the short period of time by 50% or doubles, or whatever the case may be, more interest, 50%, whatever the case may be, that means that the individual has to cut and reduce in the budget. So of course, obviously, I'm going to ask Mr. Connie, Uncle Connie, what are we going to cut in the public budget? The RCMP, there's our Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the prisons, the sanitation workers, of course, the healthcare, national defense. Already I've seen some cuts in the immigration Canada by thousands and thousands of jobs. So I'll show you a little bit of budgetary, of course, implementation due to the fact that we paid more interest, because an individual will have to reduce the costs, whether stop smoking cigarettes or stop the Netflix subscription, or bringing down the cost of the cell phone, the internet, whatever the costs, whatever the budget bills, one has to reduce. Maybe stop smoking, stop buying that more expensive food, stop buying wine, or stop buying beer. So those are the realities of how the more interest one pays, the more, if your salary doesn't increase in proportion, the mathematical financial principle applies that you have to reduce the spending. So this is just kind of standard and mathematical financial principles. So according to these mathematical financial principles, of the more the interest increases while the income doesn't, the more you have to cut and reduce the spending. So that applies for the public and the private. So that's why the DRT theory, the debt refusion theory, is what has to be implemented. So we're going to take all the public-private debt of Canada. I'm going to explain now the debt refusion theory. We're going to take my $10,000, your $10,000, coast to coast, ocean to ocean. We're going to convert all the public and the private debt into US dollars. All that public-private debt, we're going to convert it into US dollars. And of course, we're going to add it with the US, because my DRT theory, I call it for the implementation of binational, Canada, United States. So all the debt, Canadian the public debt and the private debt of Canada, including my 10,000, we're going to convert it, add it all up, we're going to convert it into US dollars and add it with the United States public-private debt. That debt is going to be the initial money supply for a new central bank, whatever we call it, in North America. We're going to issue a new currency called the UE. U dot universal, E dot exchange, U dot unit. The UE. The U dot universal, E dot exchange, U dot unit. The U dot universal, E dot exchange, U dot unit. The UE. The universal exchange unit is going to have the value of the US dollar. On that value of the US dollar, we're going to put a 10% interest rate. It's going to not be able to be more than 10%. Is going to be 3.33, 1.56, 7.18, 4.18, 6.1, 9.3, below 10. We're going to set that standard for all loans thereafter. So it's going to be a new financial standard. Is going to be 10% maximum on all loans. There's not going to be any other higher than 10%. That's going to be the new standard for all interest rates. 10% on all the mortgages, whatever the case may be, is going to be a kind of also a resetting combination. So the DRT can be expanded, not just Canada, United States, Mexico if they will, blah, 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 NATO if they will, blah, 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 blah. So also it could be a universal currency, to reform at the end of the day. But first and foremost, Canada, United States. Canada, United States, first and foremost, the creation of the UE. With that money, we're going to be able to rebuild the infrastructure of North America, rebuild the bridges, the aqueducts, build those 44 tunnels in case of a thermonuclear war. We're going to start building those 44, construct and build those 44 tunnels, inspired by the Cheyenne Mountain Complex and of course the Montreal Underground Village. We've got to build across Canada, United States, in case of a thermonuclear war, which can happen. We're close to World War III. It's possible that a nuclear armed conflict arises, maybe even today, maybe tomorrow, maybe June 20th, June 21st, first day of of course, summer equinox. It could be 1st of July, 4th of July, July 24th. It could be July 24th, July 24th. I don't know, but it's a possibility on the horizon. A nuclear war, it almost happened in Pakistan and India. So the DRT, debt refusion, we're going to have to implement it, and we're going to take all the public and the private debt. With that money, we're going to convert it into US dollar, and with that money, we're going to do also mass finance citizens fitness, mass finance citizens to work out, train, exercise, mass finance citizens fitness activities across, also tourism across the 63. You know, we're going to get rid of the border, we're going to get rid of the border, create a common currency and focus coast to coast, ocean to ocean, security, service, and defense, and also create the two complementary covenant and cooperative institutions, the Dragon Army, of course, the North American Integrated Dance League. That's what we're going to get doing, the North American Integrated Dance League. And of course, we're going to create the Dragon Army for SSD, aka the North American Integrated SSD Legion, SSD, Security, Service, and Defense Legion, the North American SSD Legion, for only and solely for S, total security, total service, total defense, and based on my new 911 Dragon Army for the North American Collective Protocols and many others philosophies and dictums which I've written, of course, over the past 7 years as the People's Doctor, of course, who presented the thesis, The Privilege of Civilization, back in 2023. And of course, the concordium is that, of course, we are going to have to implement the DRT because we're on the verge of a financial collapse. And if not the financial collapse happens, we're going to implement it during the financial collapse, the DRT, debt refusion theory, which in my debt refusion theory is integrated monetary integration theory, and that's what we're going to have to get doing on the doing, and that's what we're going to have to do. It's something which is a paradox that I present on the table, the D, debt, R, refusion T theory, the debt refusion theory for the creation, my eye, something in my eye, the debt refusion theory for the creation of the UE is the solution, that's what I put on the table along with those trillions of kisses, and that's how we got to get doing that rock and roll to get the DRT, debt refusion theory for the creation of the universal exchange in it. And that's what is something which we have to implement as soon as possible. We're going to have to implement the universal exchange unit, of course, and of course the DRT integrates in my debt refusion theory is integrated monetary integration theory. So we have to, I'm excited about it because it's a solution, and it's a paradox. Myself financially stressed, and the DRT theory, I have to give a credit to an anonymous acquaintance. So a few years ago, I think 2018 Christmas, Xmas, holidays, was gifted a book, and that book, paradoxically, I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist, but that book it was semi-conspiratorial, you know. In nature, it was a bit conspiratorial, but it had lots of information, historical, financial information about the ancient banking system of ancient Egypt, Sumer, Babylon, of course, ancient India, ancient China, and the British Empire, and it focused a lot on the Great Recession, which lasted about 3 years during 2007, 2010, 2007, 2010. That's what it lasted, and it lasted about 3 years, and you know that's what it's focused more about. But paradoxically, about the inspiration for the DRT came from reading that book, of course, which was gifted to me, and I wrote on it, and it was at the end, after a few sessions of writing and reading it several times in several chapters and scribbling on it information and knowledge, and pretty much comes the DRT partly like a third of the inspiration of the debt refusion theory is, of course, inspired by the gift of that book, which was, I'm not big of a conspiracy theorist, but it argued that the Great Recession pretty much was created by the underworld, the Chinese underworld, or by an economist, financial economist, by somebody who had worked in finance in Canada, who was part of the Chinese Communist Party and the financial underworld, Chinese triads and criminal organizations, but a bit on the mystic conspiracy theories, which I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist. Now, I don't know if the connection between the surname and the founders of the triads of underworld, Chinese underworld of China, the most powerful criminal underworld in China. That's kind of, it made those links, and I don't know about that. I don't really know much about that because I'm not an expert in that. My thing is geopolitics, and for the North American Collective, for the 63 is what I know, the 10 provinces, 50 states, 3 territories, coast to coast, ocean to ocean, and all who come to join us here with benevolence towards the North American Collective and my dream, welcome to be my family, pledge your allegiance, legions, internal and external, coast to coast, defense, security, and service. The DRT, debt refusion theory, is of course the solution for the great North American civilizational complex, which of course we have a collective together. So the DRT, implementing the DRT, building those 44 tunnels, mass finance tourism, mass finance the rebuilding of the aqueducts, the sewers, the aqueducts, and the bridges, and the highways. We're going to be able to do lots of good for the public and the private. We're going to build the North American Imperial People's Coliseum on the Canadian-US border to be 11 times bigger than the Hardball Ball, and the inauguration event is going to be Dragon versus Trump, and going to train hard in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. And that's what we're going to get doing on that, and we're going to get doing to Rock&Roll to build the Forgotten Goddess Temple, and that's what we're going to have to be doing now, today, more than ever. It's a requirement that we have to do in parallel to the implementation of the DRT is the CIT, Citizen Integration Theory, which we have to be doing on the go, is we have to really implement the debt refusion theory for the creation of the UE, something that it's close to my heart, and it's the solution. You can argue all you want, but the mathematical financial principles and the indicators of the financial situation, both for Canada and the United States, and both for the public and the private, is of course very similar. We are on a point of financial collapse, which we have to be doing on the public financial collapse, which we can approach, and which is pretty close on the horizon. It's possible that during the coming days, weeks, and hours ahead, there's a public financial collapse. I'm listening to a doctor, but I take the doctor off because he said too many times. So I'm gonna take the doctor off from this citizen. It's 3:58 p.m. and you said too many times, so I'm gonna have to demote a bit of the doctor's uh, consistency in the fluence of the way the paragraphs were set. I said you said 3 hours in just 6 words and then 6 words and then 6 words So no, and I'm gonna take your doctorate away and people's doctor here. Thank you. Financial stress, but that's how we're gonna rock and roll. Encourage all. Remember, working out, training, exercising is great medicine, and gratitude. Because civilization is a privilege, so I gotta send some love into those firefighters, butchers, nurses, doctors, truckers, and plumbers on the roads, the plumbers, the electricians, the construction workers, the firefighters, those flipping, preparing, those delivering some food across the collective, those, of course, flipping some hamburgers, cheeseburgers in the fast food, and making some pizzas, and health comes with wellness, and, of course, gratitude and exercise, gratitude and exercise, gratitude and exercise, gratitude and exercise are two combos which are great for mental health and general wellness. And if you're an Aspie, I know you struggled, myself included, so love. Now spiritual things, a little bit of mystic spiritual quickness, a few minutes, not a lot, because we're going to have to tango a little bit in that French, because we're in La Belle Province, so here we are, and that's what we got to get doing with that, and that's what we got to get rock and roll it, and that's what we got to get doing on the go with that, and we got to get on the love. And that's what we have to do, the implementation of the DRT, like I said. So now a little bit of a spirituality. Ready for spirituality? Mystic. Mystery of the Bible. Mysteries of the Bible. God, Goddess of the Bible, or what we have now as the Bible of the scribes, and the scribes described and mistranslated, but of course maybe in the pyramids remain the temples and tombs and temples and tombs of the god, goddesses, and the supreme force, creator of the universe. I don't know. I have questions. I say God, goddess, the 63, my dream, the dancing goddess in the dragon kingdom. Nobody's born a dragon is the motto of the dragon army, and that's all we have to get doing with that, and that's all we have to get on the correlation side to get it on the go and get it on the love side of things, and that's all we have to get doing for now. And strike on the horizon, pro-labor and love universal revolutionary center. So I guess they're gonna get on that strike. So spiritual mystic appellations. I'm a wannabe Telemite. I'm a wannabe Telemite. I have questions, and I believe in God, goddess. Do my sun salutations, and stars counting. You can't count the trillions of stars. So much light, and gotta be in the shade and the blackness of the midnight and 3 a.m. in the midnight, post midnight, to see and count, and far away from the city pollution. And that's what we're gonna discuss. A little bit of mystic spirituality and mystic minutes with Dragon. Mysteries of the Bible. The embalmment of Israel, Jacob Israel, the story from the Bible in Genesis chapter 50, if you read it, is a great mystery. Read Genesis chapter 50 and you see there that Jacob Israel, it's mentioned that he was embalmed by the physicians, and that the Egyptians mourned for him according the 40 days of the embalmment and 70 days of mourning. So these are ancient Egyptian funerary rites. Now the problem is that they would have not performed these rituals and rites unless the deceased was part of the ancient religion of Egypt. So sometimes the answers or the mysteries, they're there embedded in the text themselves. So who's the goddess of Israel then? Who's the goddess of Israel then? Jacob and the 12 tribes. If Jacob Israel, according to the Torah, the Bible, was embalmed, they did the incantations of the ancient Egyptian deities on the body. It's written in the Bible. In the Bible. It's written there. Genesis chapter 50. The mysteries of the Bible of Jacob Israel is that his embalmment was also related to the goddess. Because ancient Israel had God goddess. Wasn't just a god in ancient Israel, also the goddess, divine feminine spirituality. So the funerary rites also had goddess rituals. Nephthys, Isis, Nephthys, Isis. So they would have not performed these rituals unless the deceased was the same religion as the embalmers, as the physicians. So that means that the goddess of Jacob and Israel was the same god and goddesses of ancient Egypt. So we have to interpret the Exodus in a different light. Because the word is not slave, is servant. And the 400 years represents a changing of a dynasty. The Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. A changing of a dynasty. Because if Jacob Israel was embalmed by the physicians of ancient Egypt, that means that they were not, it was the same. It had to be, in order for the procedures to go, the ancient Egyptian funerary rites, that means that Jacob Israel the deceased, they had to be the same religion. They would have not embalmed foreigners of another religion. So the god goddess of Israel, who became Israel after that night and the night, that means that is the same as the ancient Egyptians. The god goddess of Israel is the same, or what it had to be. It's in the text. It's in the text. The answer is in the text. In the text, Genesis chapter 50, it's written that the physicians of ancient Egypt embalmed Israel. So these procedures of the 40 days, as it's written there, the 40-day embalmment time for the 40 days, and the 70 days, and it says the Egyptians mourned Israel, Jacob. Now the Egyptians would have not mourned according to the sacred funerary rites, of course, a slave or stranger. So that means that the 12 tribes of Israel, and we say Israel, that was 3,500 years ago, according to what we know, BCE, before the Common Era. So this supposedly embalmment is more than 3,500 years ago, when Egypt was still the superpower. And then it says that 400 years are passed, approximately 400 years, and then the arrival of Moses, after the embalmment of Israel. But if Israel was embalmed, and the Egyptians embalmed, and if this embalmment procedure, funerary rites, were done according to the ancient Egyptian religion, they were specialized, they were castes, right? They were scribes who passed down the information and the knowledge of the 40-day ritual embalmment and the 70-day mourning, and the incantations to those ancient Egyptian deities, gods and goddesses, and the sacred language, ancient Egyptian sacred hieroglyphic language, had to be performed on Jacob, on Israel, the father of the 12 tribes. So that means that the deceased, Jacob Israel, the god and the goddess, because Jacob Israel, remember, asked several times, what is your name, what is your name, what is your name? Several times. That means that the god, goddess of Israel was the same and is the same as the ancient Egyptians who built the pyramids. Who built the pyramids, who built the pyramids, who built the pyramids. That's just the text. They would have not embalmed. Those rites, how they're performed, the ritual spirituality and incantations to the ancient Egyptians. So thus, by that's that's just a mystery, a mystic mystery, So that's what it is according to the Torah, to the scribes, the translation, traduction, and how we proceed from that information in the Bible, in the Torah itself, is that they had Jacob Israel, the God of Israel, the deceased, had to be the same spiritual belief, which was the ancient Egyptian religion, in order to be accorded the embalmment rights. And of course it was a privilege, which only some of the higher hierarchies, but it changed afterwards. But at the beginning it was only the elite. So we're going to switch a little bit to that French now, because we're in La Belle Province. So that's how we're going to rock and roll with that. And that's how we're going to rock and roll to get that XYZ and to get a little bit of that loving. So French, because we made the great linguistic compromise to getting on the go, to get doing now, and to make my individual effort to make it for the French language, Alright, so it's time for that French, because we're in La Belle Province, and meditate on, read Genesis chapter 50, read Genesis chapter 50, and pledge your allegiance to our family. That's how we're going to rock and roll it. French, because we're in La Belle Province, in 3, 2, 1. et bienvenue dans la grotte de votre dragon arc-en-ciel en vous encourageant à faire de l'entraînement physique. Une petite vite session, bien sûr, de la géopolitique et du rock-and-roll. Puis bien sûr, que je commence par la gratitude. Je vais pouvoir payer mon loyer le 1er juin 2025 aujourd'hui. Puis je dois saluer quelqu'un qui m'avait donné une opportunité pour le travail, pour faire 30 de l'heure. J'ai jamais fait 30 de l'heure. J'ai eu bien de l'emploi. Vous savez que j'ai eu bien de l'emploi, mais malheureusement, c'était juste un couple de semaines, un couple de mois, parce que écart dû à l'Asperger, l'autisme hautement fonctionnel, c'est une condition de neurodivergence avec laquelle je vis. Puis bien sûr, je l'ai accepté il y a 3 ans et demi parce que ça faisait bien des années, comme l'avait dit, pendant plusieurs années, plusieurs personnes, comme l'avait dit, mais j'ai pas de diagnostic officiel, c'est sûr, parce que j'attends après une médecine de famille, ça fait plus que 4 ans, mais je vais faire les procédures, je suis en attente, bien sûr, de faire du dialogue avec la clinique Asperger de Montréal, puis bien sûr, j'ai les caractéristiques, mais je suis moi-même, je suis Asperger, j'ai l'Aspie, je suis Aspie, j'ai l'Asperger. Je vis avec cette condition de neurodivergence qui peut être quand même difficile pour la compréhension de certaines choses, des normes de la société. Puis j'ai de la misère dans certaines choses, je suis pas bon, mais dans d'autres choses, j'excelle. Je suis quand même très bon à faire beaucoup de choses, mais je suis quand même bon à faire certaines choses. Mais dans d'autres choses, on a un peu de la misère, les Aspie. Moi-même, en tant qu'individu faisant partie de cette petite communauté, il n'y a pas beaucoup d'Asperger dans le monde, moins d'1%, moins de la moitié d'un pourcentage. C'est 0,44%, hein? Pas beaucoup, 0,44% des citoyens de l'Amérique du Nord, là, du collectif nord-américain. Fait que je vis avec, je fais toujours, j'essaie de bâtir des ponts le plus possible. Puis, bien sûr, des fois, c'est sûr que c'est plus de compréhension qui est nécessaire de mon bord, faire du travail, puis avec les neurotypiques, parce que vous êtes la majorité de 99,56%, puis juste des fois la manière qu'on communique, ça peut être un peu étrange, ou des fois on utilise des mots trop académiques, philosophiques, sophistiqués un peu dans le domaine un peu intellectuel, mais c'est sûr que je peux quand même expliquer d'une autre manière les choses de lesquelles je parle, puis c'est surtout la géopolitique pour moi-même, puis je suis aussi un artiste, un athlète, analyste et théoricien en géopolitique indépendant, puis qui vous encourage à faire de l'entraînement physique. La gratitude, pareillement, est fondamentalement complémentaire. C'est quelque chose qui est bon pour la santé mentale, pour le moral. C'est quelque chose que je vous encourage, bien sûr, à faire le plus possible que vous pouvez. Puis aujourd'hui, bien sûr, on se rapproche d'avoir d'autres tarifs. Sur l'aluminium et l'acier, bien sûr, qui va commencer cette semaine par Donald Trump qui a annoncé un autre, fait que ça va peut-être faire beaucoup de dommages parce qu'on dépend, veut pas, on dépend de l'économie des États-Unis. 85% de nos exportations s'en vont vers les États-Unis, fait que c'est quelque chose qu'il faut qu'on prenne en considération. Puis je vais dire, parce que je suis un analyste et théoricien en géopolitique, et je prends beaucoup de fierté. Hein. Je suis fier de mon travail indépendant en géopolitique, bien sûr, car moi-même, je répète qu'est-ce que j'ai dans mon travail indépendant en géopolitique en étant analyste et théoricien en géopolitique indépendant, que j'ai prévu la situation qui se déroule actuellement en 2019, en octobre, en novembre. J'ai la preuve, j'ai la vidéo en ligne, donc je discute une 3e guerre mondiale possible sur l'horizon depuis 2019, soit une conflagration internationale. Et donc, bien sûr, je suis dans ce mode de 3e guerre mondiale depuis à peu près 2019 et je suis très fier d'avoir créé un système d'entraînement physique qui ne requiert aucun équipement, qui est ça dépend, plus ou moins facile, ça dépend d'où que vous commencez, mais moi-même, j'ai commencé à m'entraîner après 2017, ça fait plus que 7 ans. Là. Puis bien sûr, quand j'ai traversé le Canada de côte à côte en 2017, où je suis allé en Colombie-Britannique, à Vancouver, puis en septembre à Halifax, en Nouvelle-Écosse. Cet événement, ça m'a complètement changé ma vie moi-même. Puis pour ça, j'ai écrit des procédures puis des protocoles pour financer les gens au tourisme parce que moi-même, ça a fait tellement du bien voyager. Ça m'a fait sortir de la dépression. Là. Ça m'a fait sortir de ma dépression. J'étais en dépression, j'étais suicidaire. Puis cet événement-là, ça m'a vraiment changé ma vie. Hein. Avant ça, j'étais en dépression, j'étais suicidaire. Puis malheureusement, dans ma communauté, qui est une petite communauté de neurodivergents là, qui vivent avec l'Asperger, le taux de suicide, puis le taux des tendances suicidaires, puis de dépression est élevé, plus élevé que la majorité complémentaire. Le taux de chômage, taux de sans-emploi chez les autistes hautement fonctionnels, chez les Aspie, comme moi-même, les Asperger, est très élevé, c'est entre 60 et 80%. Fait que c'est 11 fois 11 fois plus, là, c'est bien plus que la majorité de la population, donc c'est 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9%, là. Fait que c'est 11 fois plus chez les Asperger. Encore une fois, c'est à cause qu'il y a beaucoup de travail à faire, de démystification, parce qu'il y en a bien qui pensent que c'est une maladie mentale, c'est une maladie, c'est pas une maladie, c'est une condition de neurodivergence. Nous, les Asperger, on a des mutations dans le cerveau, et à cause de ces mutations dans le cerveau, ces mutations-là, ça cause qu'on voit le monde différemment. On voit le monde d'une autre manière. On pense différemment dans certaines choses, mais on en enforce quand même nos capacités, surtout dans les choses qui sont nos intérêts spéciaux, aussi connus comme nos intérêts obsessifs. Nos intérêts obsessifs, moi-même, c'est la géopolitique, l'entraînement physique, la danse est mon sport préféré, puis l'entraînement que je préfère le plus, c'est la danse. Et bien sûr, parallèlement avec le rock&roll. Le rock&roll, j'en compose des chansons au quotidien, là. Fait que c'est ça que je fais le plus au quotidien, 24 sur 24. Puis je prends beaucoup de fierté dans mon travail en géopolitique. J'ai prévu qu'est-ce qui se passe maintenant. Puis je dois dire un principe là, que je vais vous dire maintenant, c'est oui toujours. C'est comme constamment oui dans ce principe que je vais me prononcer maintenant en géopolitique. C'est comme le chiffre pi. Tu sais, le chiffre qui symbolise le pi là, en mathématiques. Le pi, c'est comme un n, un symbole n. Puis c'est toujours 3,1415, 16. Puis ça a toujours référence, bien sûr. Ça fait toujours référence ou diamètre et la circonférence d'un cercle. C'est toujours le diamètre et la circonférence d'un cercle vis-à-vis la circonférence et le diamètre d'un cercle. Fait c'est pi, c'est toujours 3,1415. Ça continue toujours comme à l'infini, là, le chiffre, mais c'est toujours cette proportion mathématique c'est constamment la même chose. C'est une constance. Il n'y a pas de non. Et peut-être, c'est toujours constamment la même chose. Donc, qu'est-ce que je vais dire maintenant en géopolitique? C'est toujours oui. Nous, là, Québécois, Canadiens, Canadiens, Québécois, notre intérêt principalement en politique, géopolitique, que ce soit, je parle de la politique externe, c'est d'avoir les meilleures relations possibles avec le Canada. Nous, en tant que Canadiens, Québécois, Canadiens, c'est d'avoir les meilleures relations possibles avec les États-Unis sur tous les niveaux économiques, financiers, de diplomatie, de culture et de sport. Là, à tous les niveaux, c'est d'avoir en première place. C'est notre intérêt principal, fondamentalement, notre premier intérêt, là, de la politique externe, je parle, donc de la géopolitique, en tant que Québécois, Canadiens, c'est d'avoir les meilleures relations économiques, financières, de défense, de sécurité militaire, de culture, de sport avec les États-Unis. Parce qu'on a une histoire commune, un destin commun, puis on a notre géographie. On est entouré de 2 océans, puis c'est les États-Unis. Puis c'est réciproque pour les États-Unis. Fait que ça, là, c'est constamment la même chose. C'est oui, il n'y a pas de non ou peut-être. Qu'est-ce que je viens de dire du principe en géopolitique puis de notre politique externe, qui est fondamentalement, bien sûr, impliquée à la géopolitique internationale. Nous, notre intérêt principalement, fondamentalement, c'est d'avoir les meilleures relations possibles avec les États-Unis. Il n'y a pas de non, il n'y a pas de peut-être. C'est toujours ça, c'est constamment ça. C'est toujours une constance, comme le chiffre, le symbole pi des mathématiques. Fait que ça change pas cette constance. C'est constamment la même chose. C'est constamment la même chose. C'est comme le symbole pi. Fait que c'est ça que je dois dire à mon oncle Legault, mon oncle Connie, nos chefs politiques, que ce soit de la droite, de la gauche ou au centre, moi-même, un centriste universel que je vais discuter maintenant, je ne vais pas tarder, je vais discuter bien sûr de la TRD, théorie de la refusion de la dette, super important que je la discute parce que c'est un paradoxe, mais c'est la solution qui peut nous sauver bien sûr des principes de ce qu'on est rendu du point de vue des finances, une situation quand même assez précaire pour bien de finances du public, puis bien de finances dans le privé, bien sûr, c'est une situation financière similaire qu'on doit s'assimiler, puis on doit intégrer, bien sûr, l'économie du Canada, des États-Unis, puis ma manière de fusionner par mon rêve, qui est fondamentalement mon rêve qui se manifeste comme le royaume de la déesse et du dragon qui danse, est fondamentalement un appel pour un concordat, pour un partenariat public-privé à travers les 63 entités politiques, soit les 10 provinces, 50 États et 3 territoires, donc la TRD, théorie de la refusion de la dette, qui dedans et la TRD est inclus la théorie d'intégration monétaire, et fondamentalement ce qui doit être fait le plus possible, le plus tôt possible, parce qu'on est à la veille d'avoir un effondrement financier, puis avec un record de dette, de surendettement des cartes de crédit, les citoyens, un surendettement et le coût de la vie qui augmente en parallèle. Le principe mathématique, c'est qu'on doit couper, puis bien sûr l'augmentation sur la dette publique et bien sûr l'augmentation des intérêts qu'on paye sur la dette publique qui a été très, très augmentée durant la COVID et durant à cause de la coronavirus, que moi-même j'ai survécu la COVID, je me suis fait vacciner 3 fois. Je vous encourage bien sûr de garder les protocoles de santé, de vous désinfecter les mains, s'il vous plaît, parce qu'on a encore des bactéries, des germes, des microbes. Fait que c'est important dans le public de faire nos dûs citoyens, là, du nettoyage dans le public, tu sais, de se nettoyer les mains, puis surtout quand on donne le clavier ou quand on utilise dans le supermarché, on regarde les produits, on le remet, fait qu'on touche, tu sais, les portes, tout ça, fait que juste vous désinfecter, puis s'il vous plaît, gardez les protocoles d'hygiène qui ont été de la COVID, c'est quelque chose qu'on doit faire. Et la TRD maintenant, théorie de la refusion de la dette, on va prendre toute la dette publique-privée, fait que TRD, c'est la solution. Il n'y a pas d'autre solution que la théorie de la refusion de la dette. C'est quelque chose qu'on doit faire l'implémentation le plus tôt possible. C'est quelque chose qu'on est à la veille peut-être d'avoir un écran. Peut-être demain, il y a bien sûr un effondrement de la bourse, une crise de la bourse, ou l'économie, bien sûr, que ça va dans le négatif, bien sûr, à cause de ses intérêts, puis à cause de qu'on est rendu avec la dette. Fait que je vous propose la solution sur la table. Je mets la solution, bien sûr, à pouvoir bâtir le temple de la déesse oubliée, puis bien sûr le palais du peuple impérial sur les frontières du Canada puis des États-Unis que je veux bâtir moi-même dans cette situation d'avoir du précaire. Moi-même en crise financière, je dois dire remerciement puis gratitude pour le 150$ que j'ai fait. Fait que la TRD, théorie de la refusion de la dette, c'est quelque chose bien sûr qu'on doit faire l'implémentation le plus possible. Puis dans ma TRD est intégrée la théorie de la fusion monétaire, c'est que la théorie d'intégration monétaire, c'est que les Européens ont fait l'implémentation dans les années 90 à la fin du 20e siècle. Au début du 21e siècle, c'est bien sûr ces choses-là qu'eux autres ils ont fait l'implémentation pour le faire dans leur collectif. Puis ils ont fait la création de la Banque centrale commune. C'est des choses comme ça, bien sûr, qu'il faut qu'on fasse dans l'avoir pour la TRD, théorie de la refusion de la dette. C'est quelque chose qu'il faut qu'on fasse, bien sûr. Ouais, je me suis dirigé vers la radio un peu pour écouter un peu de la radio. Il me parlait pas beaucoup trop d'amour pour les camionneurs, les boulangers, les infirmières. Puis c'était un peu la critique, il faut que la balancer un peu par la gratitude aussi, hein, parce que la civilisation c'est un privilège. Fait que je vais envoyer moi-même, aussi prendre un temps pour envoyer l'amour aux camionneurs ou un petit peu de rock-and-roll pour les travailleurs du Rock-Québec, parce que c'est à cause des travailleurs du Rock-Québec aussi du 20e siècle qui ont travaillé pour que j'aille ce privilège pour avoir l'électricité chez nous, puis les travailleurs en construction, bien sûr, puis les camionneurs, les boulangers, ceux qui font les champs de patates, font la construction, tous les logiciels, les travailleurs du Québec, du Canada, du collectif, bien sûr, j'en ai un peu d'amour parce que présentement, moi-même, je suis à la recherche d'embauche, d'emploi, mais pour l'opportunité de travail, mais j'ai mon rêve, puis j'ai la TRD, théorie de la refusion de la dette, que je mets sur la table. Bien sûr, la TRD, théorie de la refusion de la dette, c'est quelque chose que moi-même, je dois faire, bien sûr, pour vous encourager à faire l'entraînement physique. Puis la gratitude, c'est bon pour la santé mentale. Fait que je la pratique à tous les jours, même avec ma neurodivergence. Des fois, c'est pas facile. Puis des fois, ça a créé beaucoup de souffrance, ça a créé beaucoup de dépression. Traverser le Canada, ça m'a fait sortir de ma dépression. Puis bien sûr, je suis ici le 1er juin. Puis je suis toujours ouvert pour les affaires. Je vous encourage à faire l'entraînement physique. Puis c'est quelque chose que je dois faire moi-même, en faisant un petit peu. J'aimerais ça avoir juste des amis avec bénéfices maintenant. Je veux juste des amis avec bénéfices. J'aimerais ça pouvoir me permettre un massage thérapeutique parce que je peux prendre un bain en soir, je vais prendre un bain, je vais me verser dans le bain. Fait que ça va compenser pour ne pas pouvoir me permettre un massage. Là, fait que ça va être bien beau après ça. Fait que la TRD, théorie de la refusion de la dette, il faut qu'on fasse l'implémentation car on est dans une situation publique et privée bien précaire. On a tellement de dettes, de surendettement qui s'est fait bien sûr dans ces temps-là, surtout avec l'augmentation du coût de la vie qui met beaucoup de pression sur bien des familles, surtout ceux qui ont des enfants. Moi-même, je peux m'en sortir. Je peux m'en sortir avec les choses que j'ai moi-même, mais c'est sûr que avec la gratitude, ça va. Fait que même que je deviens un vieux austère, assez sévère, puis très actif physiquement. Fait que la TRD, théorie de la refusion de la dette, ça contient la théorie d'intégration monétaire. Et à cause qu'on est rendu dans une situation précaire, même publique et privée, bien sûr, l'intérêt qu'on a payé depuis 5 ans, ça a augmenté durant la COVID. L'intérêt qu'on a payé sur la dette publique, c'est sûr qu'il va falloir faire l'implémentation de ma TRD le plus tôt possible. Fait que la théorie R, refusion de la dette, ça contient la théorie d'intégration monétaire, ce qui est la théorie financière que les Européens ont fait l'implémentation. Donc, on va prendre toute la dette publique-privée, inclus à mon 10 000 $. On va faire la conversion de toute la dette publique-privée du Canada dans la devise des États-Unis. Puis parce qu'il faut qu'on fasse l'implémentation de ma TRD binationale, parce que le Canada et les États-Unis sont dans une situation financière similaire. Fait que on va faire l'addition avec la dette publique privée des États-Unis. Fait que notre dette du Canada, du Québec, du Canada, incluant mon 10 000 à la Banque Royale, on va faire la conversion dans la devise des États-Unis. On va faire l'addition avec la dette avec la dette publique privée des États-Unis, cet argent-là, ce chiffre-là, avec avec l'argent qui existe en circulation parallèlement, ça va être on va faire la création d'une nouvelle banque centrale parallèlement, mais pour l'Amérique du Nord, comme qu'ils ont fait des années 90, la Banque centrale de l'Europe européenne pour mettre en circulation une nouvelle monnaie qui s'appelle l'euro, parce que bien sûr, nous on va ils ont détruit leur banque centrale nationale, les Allemands, les Français, les Italiens, puis leur ancienne monnaie, ils n'ont plus en Europe. Ils ont une monnaie commune, l'euro. Fait que c'est pour ça que je vous dis que dans ma TRD, ça contient la théorie d'intégration monétaire. Fait que toute la dette publique privée du Canada, on va convertir dans la devise des États-Unis. On va faire l'addition avec la dette publique privée des États-Unis. Cet argent-là, ça va faire fondation pour une nouvelle banque. Comment qu'on l'appelle, bien sûr, ça ne dérange pas exactement le nom de la banque, mais on va mettre en circulation une nouvelle monnaie qui aura la valeur du dollar des États-Unis, le UI. U.unité, échange, U.universel. U.unité, E.échange, U.universel. Le UI. U.unité, E.échange, U.universel. Le UI. On va mettre un taux d'intérêt de 10% maximum. Il ne pourra pas avoir plus d'intérêt chargé pour les citoyens plus que 10. Ça pourra être en bas de 10, 3.33, 7.18, 4.18, 9.3, 6.1. En bas de 10, 3.33, 6.1, 9.3. En bas là, blablabla. Un taux d'intérêt de 10% maximum après ça. Fait que ça va être comme un renforcement pour le 21e siècle. Puis on va faire la création de cette nouvelle monnaie, lui, avec cet argent-là. Et par l'implémentation de ma TRD, soit la théorie de la révision de la dette, on va pouvoir rebâtir l'infrastructure du collectif de l'Amérique du Nord, les aqueducs, les ponts. On va pouvoir fonder, financer la création, la construction des 44 tunnels à travers le collectif nord-américain dans le cas d'une guerre thermonucléaire et pour la continuité du collectif nord-américain dans le cas de cette guerre thermonucléaire qui est possible. On va bien sûr financer les gens à l'entraînement physique, on va financer les gens au tourisme, on va bâtir d'autres centrales de l'Hydro-Québec et on va fonder, financer les 2 institutions de partenariat public-privé, soit l'armée du Dragon pour la sécurité, services et défense, soit l'armée nord-américaine intégrée pour les légions de la SSD, du collectif de l'Amérique du Nord, soit pour la sécurité, services, défense et bien sûr pour la ligue de danse, pour la danse de l'environnement, pour l'éducation sur l'environnement, puis l'action, bien sûr, parce que ça prend l'action de l'individu pour l'environnement, pour le recyclage et le compostage, et bien sûr pour l'armée de la déesse qui danse, soit la ligue de danse intégrée, bien sûr, puis on va faire l'armée du dragon, bien sûr, pour la faire, et bien sûr, complémentairement, on va faire, bien sûr, beaucoup de biens publics et privés, bien sûr, financer les gens, l'entraînement physique, ça va augmenter le moral, puis la santé, bien sûr, du citoyen, parce que c'est bon pour la santé, bien sûr. Fait avec la TRD, on va faire bien du bien commun pour les citoyens. On va financer les gens à l'entraînement physique, on va financer les gens au tourisme, bâtir les 44 tunnels et fonder les 2 institutions. On va faire un grand recensement du collectif du Nord pour voir ceux qui peuvent servir dans ces 2 institutions de partenariat public-privé. Et bien sûr, on va faire la fondation de ces 2 institutions de complémentaires qui se rajouteront, bien sûr, sur le bien-être, puis pour la santé, puis pour la joie du collectif de l'Amérique du Nord. Et bien sûr, on va faire un passeport commun. On va faire la création d'un passeport commun pour les citoyens du collectif de l'Amérique du Nord, pour les 63, les 10 provinces, 50 États et 3 territoires, 10 provinces, 50 États et 3 territoires, ça fait pour les 63. On va faire un grand recensement de la population du Québec, du Canada, des États-Unis. On va faire la création pour la défense, la sécurité, service de côte à côte, océanation. On va enlever la frontière, prêter allégeance, vie de famille pour l'armée du dragon, le citoyen, bien sûr, l'armée du dragon, prêter allégeance, vie de famille.